Hello, hello. This is Glenn talking about fluency today. California standards are about appropriate speed, not too fast, not too slow, kind of a Goldilocks thing. Accuracy, meaning every word that's on the page should be read accurately. And then prosody, which is, of course, the intonation, the beautiful expression that exists. So, in contrast to what Dibbles promotes, which is really fast reading, like freaking out, but not so much about comprehension. Actually, the new one has comprehension, but didn't used to. Uh, we want appropriate speed. Of course, chunking is an important part of uh, fluency as well, because you want to. There are certain places where you stop and pause just a little bit. So the way you teach that fluency is by modeling to kids, by reading to them, by explicit instruction. In other words, you're modeling, doing shared practice. Kids are doing guided practice. You're giving them opportunities to read. You're giving them texts that are not too hard, not too easy. And you're doing guided reading. All right, so when you're reading to kids, make sure to read with really interesting and thoughtful voices. Bring the characters to life, like an ant maybe be speaking in a really high voice, and a bear might be speaking in a low voice. So bring those characters to life and give the kids verbal and nonverbal cues. Show that prosody and it's kind of whatever the text says, just make it super dramatic, like you're in theater or something. Just go all out. Sustained silent reading is one of the great ways to support children's reading for fluency. Of course, anytime when you're doing sustained silent reading, you should probably have reading workshop. You should have a little mini lesson before the kids read. And during that mini lesson time, you can model for them self-correction. So you get a big book out or some kind of text on the overhead and you read it and oh, I made a mistake. Let me read that again. So you show them what to do when you make a mistake on things. You show them how to read with little chunks and that you don't just read straight along. And with expression, obviously. One good way to do that is with video or audio taping or listening to an actor. When you go to YouTube, you can see actors that are reading stories. That's really good. I usually do that before the November parent-teacher conferences. And then with the parents, I sit and listen to the student read, and that grounds our discussion, helps us understand what work we have yet to do. Radio reading is one where the kids are going to read a passage, some kind of passage, and they read it over several times so they get it just perfect and ready for performance. And then they read it, and the class gets to listen to all the different performances. So, supportive methods to help students who are reading difficult text. So if they're in social studies and the text is really hard, of course, we don't like teacher reading because then the students can't use any strategies and they're not practicing to decode. But when there's no other way, then teacher reading is okay. That's not a long-term solution. If you're finding yourself reading a lot to the kids, get other books with the same content as the social studies book and making sure that the books are easier and then have them read those books. Choral reading, everyone reads together. You can do that for a couple pages maybe and give them a sense for what fluency sounds like. Repeated reading is when kids read the same thing 2 or 3 times. So you read it through, then they read it, then they read it again, and they get better. In timed reading, you just time it. And this is for kids who typically are really slow with reading, and timing doesn't make it go too fast. If you make a little chart and you show first time he read it was 90 seconds, second time it was 60 seconds, third time it was 30 seconds, and the child sees that progress, they're very encouraged. Echo reading is when you read just a passage, a sentence or a paragraph or a page, and actually a sentence, and then they read a sentence. Alternative is when you read a paragraph or a page, and then the student reads a paragraph or a page. Buddy reading is when two kids sit knee to knee, eye to eye, in front of each other. One reads, the other maybe follows along, and then the other child, the buddy, reads, and first child follows along. So silent reading is, of course, the best because kids get to use their strategies. They get to reread, they get to look at the picture, they get to sound out words that are difficult, they get to look up words that are complicated. So silent reading is really the best because you can use strategies. But of course, for many kids, sometimes they're required to read texts that are very difficult for them. So you need those other supportive methods. Of course, you need lots of time to practice, or we all need times to practice. And so I'd like you to take some time and take a look at this and practice some of those things in the classroom where you are. Practice reading like passages like Joyful Noise by Paul Fleischman. These are very fun. And Mayflies, here's another one. You kind of go down from, you have two groups reading. One group reads the left side, one group reads the right side, and then you just read down. So I'm just going to zip through those. Interactive read alouds help because it models fluency and expression, and of course it's a comprehension strategy. It's mostly not for to model decoding, but in shared reading you do absolutely, you're modeling decoding. So you're reading together and you're trying to show fluency and prosody and proper speed. So whenever you read to kids, interactive reading, you're developing not only knowledge about fluency, but also developing that love of books, exposing them to a variety of genres, building a background vocabulary, and you can have great conversations with them. Shared reading is an experience where they can build also print knowledge and all the things that are helpful for fluency. So in shared reading, you make sure you have a fun text, predictable lines, repeated lines, limited, not too much text because you can't go on forever on that. Text could have rhythm or rhyme. So if you think of Frog and Toad, or you think of Dr. Seuss kinds of books, text should match the illustration, not tell a different story. So it makes it easier to decode the text. And then, of course, with repeated readings, it provides struggling readers with necessary support, all of this shared reading, and it can help build word knowledge and Reading fluency allows students to enjoy materials that they might not otherwise be able to read on their own because you're reading it together. And it ensures students are feeling successful, providing support to the entire group. So in shared reading, you're following along with a pointer or with your hand, reading under each word, and the kids are reading along with you. Shared reading is part of the California Standards for English Language Arts, and it helps teach these things. Of course, another thing to do is morning message. So you write out what's happening that day. Sometimes you could leave spaces like I have here, and kids could fill them in. That's one of the ways that they can begin to predict what's there, even though it's not there. When you're reading the same book, it's good to read the same book, but when you're reading the same book, here are some things to do each day. Introduce it, picture walk, concepts about print, then teacher reads it. But on day 2, maybe you echo read it. You do a little mini lesson on maybe self-correction or reading with prosody or appropriate speed. And then the next day you do choral reading, another mini lesson, more choral reading. You get the idea. One thing to do is to read poetry. If you read poetry, it's meant to be read over and over and over again. So really good to practice. Dig a little hole, plant a little seed, pour a little water, and pull a little weed. Not that kind of weed. Don Holdaway is the father of shared reading. He's from New Zealand and a great educator. You can look him up on YouTube and read about him. Really great fellow and very important to the world. One example of a great book to read would be Chicka Chicka Boom Boom. Read that all together. So thank you very much. And that's it.